Hi there, and welcome back to part 3 with Terraform and Azure. And in this video I'm going to deploy the VNETs, the virtual networks. And let's share this fantastic drawing that I created earlier. I already showed it in the first video. So basically it's best practice to segregate your configuration a little bit, right? For your infrastructure as code. It makes no sense to add your key vault, your storage account, everything to one big, like Terraform, I don't know, monster, however you want to call it. It will be hard to maintain, I think, at least. So I would always say just segregate it a little bit and combine things that make sense, I would say. So, and from my personal perspective, this first part here that I'm highlighting there, this one, this part, this makes sense for me, you know, to combine this. So the virtual network, then the subnets actually, and then the network security groups, sort of the firewalls attached to those subnets, right? And then the virtual machines gets attached to that network security group. It's like sort of a firewall, and then we can arrange network filtering there. Very fine-grained, by the way. Yes, that's that part. Now we go back to the code editor. Let's close some things here. Let's clean the screen, make it a little bit more clear. And like I said, we're going to focus on the virtual networks. So let's open this guy here, and already you see some history here. I will delete that because I played around with this for some time. I will also delete the providers, I will delete the environments, and I will delete the log file there. So exactly the same setup as we had with the resource group. We have a main.tf file. And this is a little bit more complicated because it's more than just a resource group. We're going to deploy the virtual net, the subnets, and the network security groups. Not very complicated, but a little bit more. Principle is exactly the same. This providers.tf file provides the provider we use to communicate against Azure to provision our resources. Inside of the variables are all the variables that we use in this main TF file. So also an address space, that's for the VNet, a VNet name, a Linux subnet, a Windows subnet, and a resource group name. So those are the variables that we have currently. And then of course we have TF file per environment where we override some stuff. For development, of course, have a different resource group. The name of the subnet is the same. Could have combined that actually, but it's fine. And then we have a name for the VNet and an address space, and I have the same for the acceptance environment, a different address space, some different names, and that's it. So now examine the main TF file. So what we first do, in the first video we created the resource group, and what we do now is not the resource keyword, but we use the data keyword. And what that is doing is behind the scenes binds to Azure, looks up this resource group with this specific name of this resource type, and then stores that in a variable named data. Right? That's it. Then on the next part, we're going to create a virtual network, and this virtual network comes from this provider file, right? That offers all that resources. What you can do as well is use some IntelliSense here, so you can do a resource space, control space, and we have no suggestions, of course. Hang on 1 second. Let's try it again. Resource. Now we have IntelliSense, by the way, and then resource. And what you always need to specify is the type. So what type of resource you want to consume from that provider. And yes, you can see there's loads of them, like you can see. But currently for the network, we're using the virtual network provider. I call it this because we're using that later on, and this is just the name I gave to it. I could actually give it a little bit more descriptive name. I could have called it like something like VNET or something like that, but it doesn't matter, it's just a demo, right? So that's the resource we get from the provider. I will remove this rubbish quick, by the way. Then we have variables, and one of the variables is the VNet name. You already saw that, right? We have this in the TF-vars file, and it comes from the variables, and we tunnel it through like we did in the second video. You get the concept by now. The address space also comes from that file, like from this file. We have an address space, and the same for a location. The location actually we get dynamically, so we don't provide the location here because we already have the resource group. We provisioned that earlier. So what we do here is bind to that data object that we created here on line 2, right? We have that now, that resource group in the data object. And inside of the data object you can do auto completion, I think. Hang on, I will show that in a second. So for instance, location data dot Azure RG group dot location. You see? So there's some IntelliSense there as well, so you don't need to guess everything. Makes it quite good. To be able to have this IntelliSense, I think you need to install an extension in Visual Studio called Terraform. You will be able to figure that out on your own, I guess. So we created the VNet here. So that's the virtual network. And inside of that virtual network, we're going to deploy some subnets, specifically a Windows subnet and a Linux subnet. We get the variables again from the TF-vars file, right? Here as well. Here we get the resource group again from the data object we got in the first step. And here, basically, the network name, we now get a different object, this Azure RM virtual network .dis, that refers to this guy that we created there, right? So we created that network, and now we refer to that network to create that Windows subnet. And we have some prefixes here and here. This is syntax I needed to figure out, by the way, but it's a little bit cryptic with these bits here, but I gave a little bit of an explanation in the end on what it exactly means because I forget it myself. But this is how you specify a /16 with a specific address space, and this as well. So and this is the Windows subnet, and that's the Linux subnet. So we have that. So basically now we have that, and that, and I'm not sure if we have, yeah, and we have network security group, these parts here, and what we have is a Windows network security group, and here the location again is from the data object. Same for the resource group name, comes from the data object all the way on top here, this data object. We consume that here as well. And then what I did as well as an example is to create a security rule to allow inbound traffic for Windows on TCP 3389. So that's the remote desktop protocol, RDP. And for Linux I did exactly the same, but then I opened SSH port 22. And don't worry, these systems, these networks are not connected to any internet or something like that. It's all connected internally only on the VNet. No one can access it unless you specify that. And what we do here as well is an association. So basically earlier we created the subnet Linux, right? We created that. I will close this for the sake of visibility. So this Linux subnet here, we created that, and we refer here to create an association with the network security group. And this resource as well comes from that provider that we got from HashiCorp, right? That Azure RM provider. And here we can bind on the subnet ID and the security group ID, and here as well. So basically that is everything that you see here. Okay? In a nutshell, so to speak. I don't have exactly the same names, and I have 2 subnets instead of 3, but it's fine, right? You get the picture. Okay. So let's now apply this configuration in a flexible manner. So we have one piece of code, and we're going to target 2 environments, again using workspaces, Terraform workspaces. And as I showed in the previous demo, I created the wrapper script for that. I explained that as well, so I'm not going to do that again. And I make the same typo here, by the way. Finger's not on the keyboard correctly. And what we do now, again, we go to target. And now we target, I think it's this one. Demo 03 VNET, yes, that one. Status and apply. And we're going to target the development environment. Okay, and if we go to Azure, that's here. And you see that in my acceptance resource group, I have nothing. And if I go to my development resource group, we also have nothing yet. We go to deploy the network security stack in a second. By the way, it is not actually best practice to deploy your virtual networks in the same resource group that you host your resources in. Somehow often you want to segregate it a little bit, have that in a different resource group. But this is a small environment, so it's fine, because otherwise resource group becomes messy very quick, because you have no folder structure, nothing. It's just one big container where everything lives in the root folder, so to speak. So if you have lots of things to manage, I would certainly recommend splitting it up in resource groups. But for this demo, it's fine. So what we do now, target environment development. We have this VNet state I just showed you, and we're going to apply that against the development environment. Let's run it and see what happens. So now again, the workspaces, you know, that concept is running in the background, and this could actually take a while, so I will pause the video for sure. As you can see here, it's trying to seven to add, so 7 new items. It's trying to deploy. Let's wait for that. Again, I must admit, quite quick compared to the last time I was trying this Terraform provider against Azure. I think it was an older version. It was certainly not performing the way it does now, but I'm happy with it. I can't complain. So let's go back to Azure and development environment. Let's refresh, and we have something here. So we have a VNet, virtual network. If you open that, you should have some an address space. As you can see, this corresponds to what we have in the variable file. As you can see here, the subnets as well. We have a Linux and a Windows subnet with some ranges there. And what we also have is network security groups, and we also have the binding here. So this Windows subnet is bound to this Windows network security group. See it like a firewall. And for Linux as well. So I have some segregation there, some separation, however you want to call it. And now that's it. And basically here you see the actual network security groups here in the root folder. Yeah, let's go back to the wrapper. Let's clean the screen, create some real estate. Let's run it again, but now against the acceptance environment. Same code, same wrapper, just a different target environment as input. We run that, and then we check also Azure. Resource group, we have an ACC resource group, and currently, as you can see, it's empty, but not for long. Okay, finished. And if we refresh the acceptance resource group, we see an acceptance virtual network. If you go inside of that, we see an address space, also that corresponds to what you saw in the variable files. You have some subnets that correspond, and we have the security group binding as well. And actually, I didn't expect it to go that fast. I think this is it already for the virtual network deployment. Let's recap a little bit. Main TF file, where you specify the resources you want to deploy. You can reuse already existing resources by specifying data and then sort of getting by name that specific object. You can then refer to that by the data object and have IntelliSense help you a little bit there. A resource always comes from the provider, and as I showed you, you have some IntelliSense there as well to create resources. Between resources you can create relations. So for instance, this, I gave that the name this, and on this line 20 we refer to that here on this network name, so you have a relation there. And same for the network security groups, also have a relation with the resource group. And then you have the binding as well, and the security group association resource that binds the security group to the subnet, right? That creates that binding, and it does the same for Windows. And this is from a functional perspective, so to speak, right? This is not real code; it's more functional code. This is how you describe your infrastructure in Azure, and specifically a virtual network with some subnets. And if you check the Terraform state folder here again, as you can see again in the previous video, acceptance, development have their own state files, so you have no conflicting things when you run that. You check out the correct workspace and you apply the specific state. And perhaps for the sake of the demo, we can create some history here, run it again on one of the environments, make a little change, and see how that reflects here. Let's do that as a last part of this video. And let's just see if we call this Windows subnet 2, for instance. Let's make that change in development. Let's reapply the wrapper script on the development environment. Let's see what we get. If we get renamed subnet, perhaps it's get deleted. I don't know exactly the mechanism behind it, but let's see. As you can see here, it must be replaced. It can't be renamed. I expected that as well, but it's fine. You know, I have an empty environment, but certainly you won't apply this on a production environment, right? Delete the whole subnet and just recreate one, because that will play havoc with your virtual machines, for instance. Okay, so we changed something in the development resource group. We go back to the development resource group, resource groups, development. In development we have a VNET. Inside of that VNET we have some subnets. And one of the subnets is now called Windows Subnet 2, with the same range, of course, still. I renamed that. And let's restore that to the previous value. Let's rerun this wrapper again. So there we have it. It's done. We can now refresh this, and it's now called Windows Subnet again, so that has the same name again. And what we can see here is on the left side we have now a Terraform state backup file, and basically this is what I was talking about, right? If you make some changes, then you get this backup file, and this Terraform state file still. This is the current state and this is a backup. I think you can revert or something like that. Don't have all the details here at hand, but that's it. So again, one piece of code with TFR files and Terraform workspaces. We created some flexibility and provisioned 2 environments with the same code set. Yeah, that was it for this video. Thanks again, and I hope to see you in part 4, where we're going to deploy a storage account.